swears. The big one was Big Lebowski.
Find a stranger in the Alps.
What happens, Larry, when you find a stranger in the Alps?
Yep.
See what happens, Larry? See what happens when you feed a soldier scrambled eggs? Those are the two they used to replace that one with. Was that Caliendo?
No,
thought it was somebody else.
He talked about Scarface, and it was like something about like Mother Fruiter, something about a shampoo bottle. It was like this whole ridiculous thing. But like there was one with Samuel Jackson, Snakes on a Plane.
Yep.
God, I can't remember what it was.
Settle up, Minor. You're getting close.
Oh God, I feel like shit.
Yeah, that's what you're giving me, a giant ass burrito.
Well, you know what? You're right.
No.
2 fucking burritos can't do it.
No. Son. All right, let's go ahead and get this started. 3, 2. I should count back 1 just to piss you off. 3, 2,
1.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to Change the Questions. Fuck it, we're doing this again. 3, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to Changing the Questions after a much longer than I would have liked to hiatus. We are going to try and start feeding back the usual schedule of audio and video and website articles that we'll be doing. I do want to give a shout out quickly to Mr. Peruzzi, keeping the site alive with Raw recaps, as well as Earl Marks, keeping things going with the SmackDown recaps. Unfortunately, there was some real-life issues that kind of screwed up my schedule, didn't really allow me to do much, but I wanted to come back with this episode. This is going to be an episode of Time Warp, the show where we discuss a wrestler from wrestling's past or present and see how they would do in a different period of time. My name is Paul Laporte. Before we go any further, that is Daniel Two Guns Bang Bang Peruzzi.
For frick's sake.
That is Mr. Michael Miner. And I wanted to get back with this one because this was actually an idea given to me by Danny Messi, a longtime CTQ fan, and I have not told either of these guys what the subject is going to be for this episode of Time
I
Warp.
tried to find out. I could not find out, but I tried.
No, because it was actually done via direct message, so nobody has seen this but me. Okay, so
Direct message to you? Or?
yes, direct message to the CTQ Twitter page at Change the Qs.
Oh,
That's at Changing the QS. So the subject we'll be covering for this episode of Time Warp
Right back.
is not a wrestler.
Not right back.
It is not a wrestler.
Howard Finkel.
The subject we are going to be covering is
JBL.
what would have... Okay, fair enough. Not a wrestler. Never been a wrestler. Not a human being. It is not a person. I guess that could also still be JBL.
Mission complete.
Byron Saxton?
We are going to be discussing what would happen if the wellness policy was around during the Attitude Era. And I didn't want to tell either of you guys this because I want you to unpack this in real time because this is an insane thing to wrap your head around.
There is no
WWF will be gone.
You know, that's the thing is, okay, so if
in WWF or in WCW too?
that's a good question.
Well, look at TNA's policy.
I think
they're pretty lax on their policy. So
let's go ahead and keep it to WWF because they said Attitude Era. That is technically specifically a WWF WWE only term. So that's the thing because when I first heard about this, it's like, okay, well, obviously we're going to talk about the people who are probably still alive today, but just how does that policy and the things that surround it culturally affect that product? There is so much to talk about. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it in just a half hour, but this is one that's really worth talking about, and I'm kind of upset I didn't think of it sooner. And again, Danny, big shout out to you. This is a fantastic idea, and we had to discuss it. So, where do we start here? Do we want to start with how this impacts the wrestlers themselves?
there'd be more people like this guy, I'm assuming.
Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there'll just be less people in the business.
I like drugs. ECW for me.
Do we look at how many of the big names would have not been big names because of the policy, like, or how they would have, like, all right, so you think of the Attitude Era, you think Rock, Stone Cold,
Undertaker,
Mick
Foley,
Foley. Let's just keep the big ones for now.
Triple H.
Big Show was pretty big back in the day, though.
Michaels, okay, yeah.
He was pilled up.
So I don't think Michaels is going to be an issue.
Michaels had a lot of pill issues.
That's right. Okay,
Yeah.
so Michaels is an issue.
If you look at him in some of his entrances, you could tell he's pilled up. He's just like...
Triple H.
Triple H probably not. Maybe a little bit with maybe some performance enhancing stuff,
like that, yeah.
but beyond that,
Yeah.
I don't think
Rock?
he's Rock's probably fine. Again, maybe some steroid stuff, but
Yeah, a lot of it was PEDs, steroids was the primary thing.
yeah.
Stone Cold.
The drinking thing changes, I think. I think he's not chugging beers on television. Although, I don't know. Maybe not because
you know what,
he
it's
still
like-
does that
because listen-
when he comes out as a guest.
I was going to say, alcohol is a thing where it's like, oh, it's legal, it's fine, so I think the alcohol thing would fly. As far as anything else, you're not going to see that stuff on screen, but it's one of those things where it's implied
Yeah, but-
that that's the worst thing you can do to your body. Alcohol is
Other than Stone
pretty
Cold,
damaging if you do enough of it. So, I don't. It's one of those things where alcohol's not illegal, but the other stuff's illegal. The other stuff is obviously worse for you if it's illegal.
Well,
so.
I think alcohol gets you a fine on the wellness policy as it is. Same thing with pot. I think it's $2,500.
Alcohol does?
like other than
I mean, if you're drunk when they test you,
Boo Dallas!
I was waiting for it. I was gonna say it. Other than Stone Cold, like because he has like the past example, since the wellness policy has been a thing, when has alcohol really been used at Angles? Punk Hardy, was that the last time we've seen alcohol?
Probably.
And that wasn't like we were having fun swinging it. It's, this is a bad thing.
There
Like,
was.
well, it was a
there
bad
was-
thing, but that's the heel telling you. It's
Yeah,
a bad
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Well, there
So
was-
it's really not a bad thing.
There was Jericho and Punk. When Jericho was trying to,
yeah, that too.
pour the
that
jack
too.
down his throat and stuff. It was kind of like a quick thing that nobody really remembers unless
And
they
that
kinda
stuff
look
is just
back
kind
at
of
it.
rehashes of the stuff he did with Raven and Ring of Honor.
Exactly.
Anyways. So, I mean, as far as the top echelon, I don't necessarily think in terms of... Because you got to remember, wellness policy is not just drug tests. This is concussion tests. This is people getting shelved for injuries.
Well,
or not working through injuries that normally they would have had to work
Headshots
through.
are gone.
headshots are gone. Yeah.
Headshots are gone. TLC, does that ever happen? If it does, probably in a much reduced capacity. That whole hardcore era, things go down very differently. There are a
Does
lot of impacts.
Mankind ever get thrown off the cell in the first place?
Maybe not, or there's a lot more.
They're warned probably that they
like
they
the
shouldn't
Shane
do it.
thing where they
Shane
threw the
Steve
airbag
Blackman.
underneath. Yeah,
Or even
maybe
the back Shane Steve
Oh,
Blackman
Shane,
off the Jumbotron.
You know, maybe they're not taking those huge bumps.
I mean, those were into crash pads and stuff, so it wasn't as...
Yeah, the Shane stuff wasn't really
Like, Mick
as
was
Well,
just
bad.
straight off the
Shane.
cell.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Shane threw the glass at the King of the Ring. Wouldn't have happened if that were the case because he was
Well-
landing. He was he was landing on his head. I don't think they
He
would.
wasn't supposed to, though. Like,
Well, going and doing it 3-4 times.
Well, that's the thing is, I agree. It may have happened, but it might have gotten stopped early, or they might have gone
Exactly.
to an early finish or something like
I
that.
mean,
The
doing it
match
once
would
where he
have
fell on his head.
been-
Okay, I better stop this. I better not try it again because if I try it again and he falls on his head, it's gonna, there's gonna be severe consequences. Especially since this guy's a huge part of the company. Even though he would take responsibility for it, I'm sure.
so I think the
What?
product is definitely neutered, if you want to say it like that.
well, it's different.
It's not what it was.
I don't know if it's neutered or if it's any worse. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who still think the Attitude Era was the best era in professional wrestling. They're going to be super pissed about this if this happens. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said. The TLC stuff, all of that kind of extreme stuff that happened at that time, it either gets dialed back or it just doesn't happen. And that's another thing that people, I think that there's a misconception is that the PG era is the result that we don't see those kind of crazy ass stipulations anymore. And I don't think that's it at all. It's the wellness policy. That's the reason that we don't see this stuff, because we don't want people getting hurt. We don't want people getting career-ending or career-shortening injuries, so we don't do that shit anymore. And the same thing with the blood. You can test once a month or once every few weeks, but you can't test every single day.
I think
'Cause
that's more PG
Well,
era.
I think that is it. I think that, again, maybe that's what it started off
it would
as.
be. I think it'd be less now than it was in the Attitude Era, but still, it would still be a thing.
Yeah, maybe.
I think a lot of this stuff
but-
is just a combination of throughout the years. When it really got kicked off when Eddie Guerrero died.
Right.
One of their
That was
biggest
the birth of
names.
the wellness policy.
That is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
I mean, Eddie was one of the most popular guys, beloved. It took that. It took Eddie Guerrero to die for them to implement some kind of wellness policy.
Yeah.
Then you move on from that, and what do you get? You get the PG stuff. Which, fine. As long as the product's still great, who cares if there's blood or not? Whatever. And then you got, from there, concussion testing. So it's all these things over the course of a decade that have dramatically changed how professional wrestling is done.
Yeah.
So it's not just one thing or two things. It's three different things that are catalysts for the position that we're in today as fans and performers.
It would be interesting if maybe, if we were to talk about like how this would have potentially happened back then. Like, what if they implement this after Brian Pillman's death, as opposed to Eddie Guerrero's death.
It was war, though,
almost.
War between WCW and WWF.
And okay, so let's, like I said, there's so much to unpack here. So we've discussed how it's kind of affect the overall environment of the actual matches. Let's discuss the obvious thing now of who's still here. Eddie Guerrero, probably. Chris Benoit, probably.
Umaga.
This is about to get real depressing, guys.
Umaga. Davey Boy.
Well, I don't
Test,
know. Some of these
Crash.
guys, it depends. Some of these guys, they were let go after not.
Yeah, and that is an
adhering to the
interesting
policy.
point too. And that was something you discussed. Is that if this is only in WWF, this wellness policy is, we may see those people go to WCW and die under their watch.
I mean, look at Jeff Hardy. He's lucky he's still alive.
Right.
Matt Hardy as well. I mean, those two guys are still alive. Thankfully, we see them and what they're doing now, but.
But I mean,
even now, they're lucky to be alive.
But
in this day.
like I said, it's just there are so many people. Like I said, we said Eddie Benoit, Test, Crash Holly, Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, maybe, probably. Because you also got to remember too, if we're going full wellness policy, even if they weren't with the company, if they needed some sort of rehab, they could have gone there.
Yeah.
China probably still around.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of people whose careers who are either still straight alive. I don't necessarily know about careers that were lengthened. If anything, there may have been certain careers that were cut off sooner, or maybe in the term of like somebody like an Edge or something like that. Maybe his career would have been lengthened for the simple fact that he wouldn't have been doing those crazy matches, or at least as extreme. They would have caught his stuff earlier. He wouldn't have been working through as many injuries. So maybe the shelf life of certain wrestlers may have been increased just for the fact that they would have had longer injury lapse. But then in turn,
Austin.
they may not have gotten as hot because they're out there and then bang, you're out for 3 months, you're out for a year, you're out for 8 months.
I mean, what you wound up
that could have hurt the momentum.
What you wound up saying about Edge, what you wound up saying about Edge, just remind me of Steve Austin, because they suffer from the same debilitation, spinal stenosis,
right.
And think about how much longer Steve Austin could have gone in that company if it weren't for that. I mean, he was around a good 5, maybe 6 years with lengthy periods of time in between injuries, neck injuries, knee injuries, and I want to say that he lived up to his full potential to a point, but it was such a short amount of time that he was actually around, if you think about it. Look at the guys now. I mean, Santino Marella had a longer WWE career than Steve Austin did in the ring, if you really think about it. There's guys that have been there for a while. Jack Swagger's been there since, 2007,
And there's a lot of guys who went longer than Austin.
Yeah, think about it. Like, a lot of these guys, The Rock, his is a different case, Hollywood, but a lot of guys that were around that time period just haven't lasted. They broke down a bit sooner than you thought they would, but if they implemented this policy years ago, maybe it could have lengthened some of these careers, and maybe you could have seen a much longer Steve Austin run, maybe a much longer Mick Foley run. I would have loved a much longer Mick Foley run.
I think Mick Foley is one of those people who would have gone a lot longer because his was mostly concussion-based stuff.
But my thing is, would that have propelled him to the top, or would they just kept him in upper mid card? Because I basically the guy is great in the ring. I like what he did, but
if he doesn't have that Hell in a Cell performance, does he
get rewarded for
being
putting his body on the line? And
what were you going to say? You were going to say something.
I was going to say. So when did Kane? Did he debut
97, October 97, October 5th, 1997.
So that was still early on in the Attitude Era, right?
Yeah, that was probably
a couple months after.
Yeah,
when it was kind of boiling around. I'd say the earliest that I went back was, in my article, was maybe around when ECW was coming around 96. That kind of bubbled at that point, but then it really got going.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no
mid 97.
I would say, I mean, the official kickstart off of the bang of the Attitude Era was probably 98. But
WrestleMania 14.
Yeah, 97 is probably, because that's right around the time
DX
DX is starting to form.
August.
Austin's starting to hit momentum as far as being a main event guy.
Because Kane's a guy who's been around that entire time, and he took headshots with chairs and
Oh,
took
yeah.
Van Terminator chair shot to the face and all that type of stuff. But he's still around. So what type of stuff was different with his career path than others? And how do you
Maybe
compare that to
maybe
try to
he's
draw conclusions?
physiologically different. You never know. Like, some guys are built differently. They can take different things.
Right. Well, and it's also a
better
fact
than
that for
others.
the majority of his career, Kane was a monster who shook off damage. So, I mean, yeah, he took those every once in a while, but he wasn't involved in, like, a lot of the extreme stuff
that's
that
true.
Edge and Christian and the Hardys and stuff were involved in. Like, yeah, maybe he'd take a shot every once in a while, but usually he wasn't.
He set on
weren't
fire
hurting
here and there.
Hurting him, yeah, exactly. Like his was kind of
Just
more
fire.
like the spectacle stunty
fire.
stuff that because he was wearing a full bodysuit that could just dunk him in flame retardant gel or whatever.
He'd just drop off. Of
Yeah,
him.
they could work ways around him. So, and again, I mean, yeah, he's the guy. He's the one guy who hasn't had who's been able to kind of keep that career around. There's maybe a couple others.
Triple
Rob Van
H.
Dam. Yeah, Triple
H comes back here and there, not full time, but
Yeah, so there are a few, and again,
Does
like
Rob Van Dam ever come to WWE if the wellness policy's in place?
again, because like I said, I think with the wellness policy, marijuana is a fine.
he'll give them in advance.
But I don't know. Yeah, that is.
This is to offset what
here's
you guys got to
5K.
pay me. You guys got to
Here's
pay
the
me
first
more than what I'm
6.
actually.
Well, that actually.
You got to pay me more than what I'm going to give to you.
Yeah.
But this is just to cover me for now.
There is that urban. I think it's true, but you never know with stories like this about professional wrestling that testing positive for marijuana, and that's $100 or $2,500 fine. You can get tested 4 times a year. So at the beginning of the year, Rob would just write them a check for $10,000. That was that's the rumor of what would happen under his thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about how certain guys' lives or careers might have been impacted. How it impacts the culture.
You know what, honestly, real quick, I wish we went back to the 80s and through the Attitude Era with this. I think it would have been crazy to go back even further and think about
Yeah.
all those huge bodies and what would have happened.
And that's
look at Hogan after the whole. Remember that whole steroid trial deal with Hogan and what wound up happening after they started implementing those drug tests around that time, and then they kind of dropped off a few years later. How Hogan just dramatically decreased in size. His cheeks got thinner. His muscles got obviously much smaller than they were, but he was still a big guy, but not anywhere near as big as he was with the bloated face and everything in the 80s and early 90s. So, I mean, like, if we went back further, imagine a lot of those guys and the way they would have looked and the way they would have been presented.
Right, but I don't think that we need to go as far back to discuss whether or not that policy being implemented means that there were any other maybe guys who were in the mid card, maybe they get a chance at the upper card now because they don't necessarily have to worry about those guys getting suspended. Is there anybody that may have broken through as a result of the wellness policy that didn't get a chance because there just wasn't any room for them?
Which period are we talking about? The 80s
Attitude
or
Era.
90s? Attitude Era. Jake the Snake. 80s and 90s. As far as the 90s go, I don't know. It's maybe Jeff Jarrett, Owen Hart, even before the tragedy. Obviously,
Right.
Why did I say it like that?
Yeah, unfortunately,
I think-
that's the one death the wellness policy doesn't prevent. I don't think there's
No,
there's
unfortunately
no way to
not.
prevent that.
I think
well-
they just did everything they could just to get up on them.
I was glad we're going down that road.
What were you
like
gonna
I said,
say?
I was going to say,
Go
well,
for
like, if the wellness policy is in place and they're more concerned with safety in general, maybe they don't buy the cheaper harness. Maybe more people are there making sure he's buckled in correctly. Maybe that never
but
happens.
again-
I don't know
But
if
that's
it-
a really, I don't want to,
Yeah,
that's a really,
I don't know if it
gray
was-
area to go down. That's
Well,
not-
I can discuss it. I don't think it was so much of a cheaper harness as it was just an error.
Well, yeah, they
It-
wanted
it
the
just-
quick
it
release so you
snapped
can get
and
off
then-
and get off. It wasn't like do the safer thing where, okay, you have to land in the ring and fiddle with it for a little bit. It's
I don't
land,
think so,
do
'cause,
this.
I mean,
and
it was
there
just
you
an
go.
We're doing the
unfortunate
same thing
circumstance.
with Sting and WCW, and I don't think that. Again, I think that's the one specifically that
fair.
just doesn't get prevented by this. There's no avoiding it.
Who
But
else-
talking-
I was going to say, who else are we talking about as far as being pushed up a bit?
I don't know. That's the question. Is there anybody else who, like I said, do they maybe? I mean, the Attitude Era wasn't as bad as the 80s as far as focusing on big guys. At least you don't think about it, but I mean,
Bart Gunn.
Rock, Stone Cold, those guys are all over 6'3". You know, they're all bigger dudes.
Tall guys.
Does WWE, WWF, whatever, try and shift the focus more to lighter guys? I mean, they did have the cruiserweight division at that time, or the light heavyweight division. Before
No.
they bought WCW. Maybe they try and make that a little bit more prominent. You don't think
maybe.
so?
I don't know, but a lot of the guys that were very prominent during that time were in WCW. They had some decent names, but they never really did anything with them. I mean, it's not Ivan, is it Ivan Putski? Scott Putski. Excuse me. Ivan was his father, Polish Power and Polish Hammer, all that stuff. But they didn't really have a stacked light heavyweight division, so it was Taka and Papi Chulo and, you know, also known as Aguila, also known as S.A. Rios, and they kind of,
I mean, you know, they
kind of had guys here and there, but they
never
really, you know, they never really pushed it like they are now with the Cruiserweight Classic.
That's what I'm saying. Would that have changed?
I don't think it would have.
If they're, you know, not having to focus as much on big bodies and ripped muscles.
I just think it was a different time, and regardless, I think more than anything, they needed large-on-the-life personalities to actually...
Well, they still focus on it now. Like, everybody talks about how Vince likes big guys. Like, that's still the thing now with the wellness policy in place, so I don't know if that really changes.
I don't know, but the thing is they say that Vince does like big guys, but look at who's at the top. Like,
exactly.
You know, we are recording this prior to the
Seth
Monday Night Raw
Rollins
with the Universal title. Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens are two guys featured in that match.
Yep.
They do not fit Vince's stereotype of a big guy at all. Finn Balor was the guy who won it, and he's only not holding it because he got injured.
Yeah, but before Roman Reigns' suspension, Reigns was supposed to get that title.
Right. So yeah, but I'm just saying he's the exception. He's not the rule anymore.
So Big Cass is winning tonight, right?
He's who possible. It turns out. Yeah, like he's in this case it's the exception, not the rule. But it was supposed to be the rule. It was supposed to be him holding that title, and then it only wasn't because of the wellness policy. So like, I guess your point's right. I guess maybe with the wellness policy in place, people like that getting busted for things, there's more
right.
Smaller guys.
And
that's a valid point.
So let's talk about now also the fact that in this current climate of the wellness policy, there is no real alternative. Well, that's not true. There is TNA that is the alternative of where you can go that doesn't feature
Jeff Hardy, Matt Hardy.
Policy.
Their wellness policy is probably really lax.
If you're WCW, and you got to remember, even though we're implementing this policy in this time period, a lot of the stuff that kind of made this this policy what people view as necessary, like probably about a dozen or so wrestler deaths haven't happened yet. So if you're WCW, do you follow suit? Do you implement a policy of your own? Or do you go down that road where you're like, hey, WWF won't let you wrestle.
There needs to be an industry-wide standard at that point to ensure these guys don't die and don't.
Right,
but you know what? I don't think it's feasible because, like you said, it's probably going to be one company saying, "Well, you know what? They got the policy, but we'll take care of you." And you know what? We have guaranteed contracts and a lot of money.
And the competition between those two is so hot that if we'll say, for example, The Rock tests positive for something. And is suspended without. I think you do your suspension without pay when you're suspended by the wellness policy. Is WCW going to approach him and go, "Hey, man, we're not going to take any paychecks away from you. Come on over." Are they going to take the moral high ground?
They won't. They already show that they're going to offer the guaranteed money. They're going to do whatever they have to do to get the talent. And if they'll do that at the risk of their own financial issues, if they're not worried about their own financial stability and their own long-term longevity, they're not going to care about the people they're hiring's longevity. Like, if they won't even have that level of concern for themselves, why are they going to have it for the people they employ? So of course they're going to do whatever they can do. They already showed they would do whatever they could do to get the talent. So if WWE has a policy in place and people aren't able to do the things they want to do, then WCW is going to be like, "Come here, we'll pay you a bunch of money, and whatever you do will look that way."
How are you going to have a guy like Lex Luger?
He's there.
The WWF. How are you going to have a guy like
Lex Luger was gone by that point.
Well, yeah, of course.
So he never has to worry about it. But that's what I'm saying. So, and the interesting thing beyond that is WCW offers guys who would get in trouble under the wellness policy money. Again, this is all hypothetical because we don't necessarily know who would have popped at that point. We have no idea. It's entirely possible that nobody important would have, and WCW wouldn't have picked up any big players. But say hypothetically they get one guy. They get one guy that WWE won't let in the ring because of concussions. Like, say, Mick Foley, they pull him from the ring earlier or something, or they don't let him do the things he wants to do. And that's another thing, too, not just testing positive for things, but it's like, we're not going to let you do the shit you want to do to get over. So maybe a guy like, maybe guys like the Hardy Boys or Edge and Christian don't get as high up the card because they don't get that sort of platform to throw themselves off of.
Literally.
Do they go there? How does that affect the Monday Night War?
I just think it's something like where, one company says, we have our own policy. WWF says, we have our policy. We got to start taking these guys' lives seriously. And then a place like maybe WCW or ECW says, well, you know what? We're going to leave it to the State Athletic Commission. And if they say you pass, you pass. And that's it. Because all you have to do for some of those places is you basically touch your toes, you do a couple things, and then you're able to perform. But
and
if you leave it to them, it's going to be a lot more dangerous if you don't
absolutely.
implement your own policy.
And also, WWF, as by their own version of history, and what a lot of people say, they won that war by being more risque and adult-oriented and dangerous, and getting on that train, and WCW couldn't catch it in time. If they're not doing that, if they're not pushing that envelope and being edgy in that way, or at least not as much, does WCW pick up on that, and do they beat them? You don't think so?
No, WCW never had that edge to them. They never had that. It always felt like more of a kiddie-based product.
NWO wasn't edgy?
NWO was edgy, but give me a break for a second. Hang on, listen to me. It wasn't like a DX thing where they were swearing and telling people to suck it and this and that. I mean, once in a while you see this, but you wouldn't see anything that was really pushing the envelope other than, a bunch of guys ganging up on a couple of other guys. That was week in, week out. No, I just can't see it changing just because you had a guy like Turner and the protocol from the top saying, well, we can't really, push too far past the boundaries of good taste, and then, when they did try it a couple of years later, it just didn't catch on. It felt too forced and phony. I don't think they had it in them to
But I think one of the reasons it didn't catch on is because WWE had been doing it for so much longer and better. But if they weren't, does that change things? Now you seem to think it might.
I mean, he made a good point that Ted Turner probably doesn't want to push it too far just because of his role in the TV station itself and like his role on top of all that stuff. So it changes. When it's Turner making the decisions versus Vincent McMahon making the decisions. But, so if WWE is forced to be less edgy, then they're doing what WCW already was doing, so WCW is going to be better at doing it. So I think the advantage goes to WCW if that, because they're gonna do whatever they can do to get the talent, and they already have, the stuff in place. I think it shifts to WCW. I honestly do.
I just think their definition of edgy was, oh look, these guys are getting beaten up. We have spray paint.
Okay, well then, all right. So let's say WCW continues to not take advantage of this. Does this leave room for ECW to get more momentum even than they had previously? By now they're the only one who's doing this, as opposed to WWF, who kind of, and WCW later on, kind of ripped this from ECW. Now ECW gets to do it on its own for basically, they're the only game in town. They can continue to do it for as long as they want, and it's very, very obvious that at this period in time in professional wrestling and in world culture in general, this sort of thing was hot. This sort of thing was over. Does WCW or does ECW get more momentum as a result of neither of these guys capitalizing on this?
WCW,
it's a different product.
WCW's downfall was their financial mistakes, so that's going to happen regardless. WWE is not going to be as popular because of everything we just said, so that leaves room for ECW to rise up. I think that,
Well, again, but ECW's failings were financial mistakes as well.
Yeah,
so.
But if WCW has those things happen first, and ECW is still around, maybe they pick up some of the talent, and maybe Heyman's like, okay, I have an opportunity to really go to the next level. I need to get my stuff in gear and not jerk people around, and I can actually make something with this. If he sees the chance for him to make a ton of money by managing his money a little better and being a little better to the people around him, he's going to do that because at the end he's still making money.
And Paul Heyman had no qualms with picking up people who had substance abuse issues or anything like that. So yeah, I mean that's definitely something where if a guy falls through the cracks in WWF or WCW, ECW is there to scoop him up.
Now, if it were modern day society back then, ECW would have its niche. WWE probably would be the better product as far as a family-friendly product. So, I mean, it would be split. I mean, I'd see ECW getting more of the fans that, want blood and guts and chair shots and everything. WWF would still get if they were doing what they did currently, or what they're doing currently with guys, not making them out to be jokes, not making them out to be clowns, making them out to be, look, he's a 500-pound king that's being carried by 6 guys down to the ring. If they didn't make jokes out of these guys, then yeah, I can see there being a great fan base for them as long as they keep the stories going okay and, don't make them look like buffoons. I think that's a lot of what the Attitude Era did, is they didn't make a lot of these guys look like buffoons, barring a few of them. And they just took it to an edgier route. But if it was basically WWE being like it is now, and ECW being like it was then yeah, I could see them kind of splitting the audience. WCW doing whatever they do. I just, if they did the same thing they were doing now, or even if they got edgier, I just don't know if it would fly around then with WCW. But I just think there will be a split amongst the audience as far as what the products offer. Kind of like it is today, except today it's a lot more dispersed. It's like WWE is like the main organization, and there's so many others out there today that and there's so many different ways to get it that you can watch all of it or some of it or a little of it and whenever you want. That's why I'm grateful for modern wrestling, but, if you had to make a choice and you had to draw a line in the sand, then it's a lot tougher. But
okay, so
depends on how society would take it.
I think there's just greater parity in general between the 3 organizations. They're on a more level playing field.
Honestly, I think they would be more distinct if one of them had a wellness policy.
They'd be a bit more distinct, but they'd be more even in terms of like overall.
Yeah, I could see
viewership.
That.
1, 2, 3. Yeah,
I could see
it is
more distinct.
WWE, WCW, ECW
because because they're more distinct products.
Yeah.
Whereas today it's WWE as the top of the heap, where you have different kind of the different organizations kind of balancing each other out. TNA being the second biggest, but by how far, whatever, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's so much out there now that's succeeding, and as long as they, do things right and attract an audience with a good story, then, they're going to keep going. So
you think that WWE still ends up being the last man standing then? Even if they did the wellness policy back then?
If they put on a great product, yes.
Which I think they'll still put out a good enough product. Yeah. I mean, like I said, the biggest issue for WCW and ECW were financial issues. It wasn't quality of the product or anything else. I mean, late WCW, okay.
Quality
of the product was
but there were cracks that were showing long before that.
Insane policy.
Those mistakes might have been a result of negative reactions to their financial problems. Like, oh no, stuff's going really far downhill. What do we do? Add 40 more people to the NWO. Give David Arquette the title. I don't know. Like, that was, oh no, we're ship sinking. What the heck do we do? And then they just did the more publicly insane things, and that was the final, the final bit for them. So I think they have the problems regardless. ECW maybe does, maybe doesn't. And WWE is still just going to kind of, be more steadily there. So, okay. I don't know. I think it's also important to look at specifically DX and their role. Like, how much is DX that? How much is
that's the interesting thing. Is
there was a PGDX.
That's true, there was too. But you also have to remember that we're not necessarily saying that this isn't implementing the PG era. It is implementing the wellness policy. And for the most part, DX was heavy on sex. Not really, that much on drugs or really even on violence. They were comedy, they were sophomore humor. So I don't know if that changes all that much. I mean, Sean had issues. Maybe he's gone sooner, but he was gone fairly early into DX's run, anyways.
That's my point. It isn't so much the product they give out. It's, are the wrestlers able to wrestle and stuff? Are they not getting suspended a lot? Are they, and how does that change their personalities as people? Like, if have a crazier personality, you're going to be a crazier person on screen. If you have to bring that back, how does that affect your on-screen persona? Are they
good point?
Are they that person? Are they the same people that we know? Is Michaels as crazy? Oh, good grief! Is Michaels as crazy as he was? If he's not on the things he was and all that type of stuff.
No, that's a good point. Again, that one's tough. The other thing that I wanted to kind of mention is. So say the wellness policy kind of does what it's intended for and elongates some careers. Once we get out of that era and into the ruthless aggression era and the PG era, how does that, because there's only so much room at the top, how does that prevent some people that maybe developed in that area from coming up? Because those guys didn't have early careers, they didn't have to retire early, they're still there because they took good care of themselves. Do we see a guy like John Cena come up as early as he does? Do we see a guy like CM Punk? Like, is there going to be room for those guys at the top if people are still there because they're just overall healthier because of the wellness policy?
We didn't mention Angle. What happens with Angle if the wellness policy is in
Ooh,
place?
I think Angle's gone a lot sooner. I think Angle's out of that company. I mean, it's funny now thinking that he has been with TNA longer than he's been with WWE, or he was with TNA longer than he was with WWE.
Yeah.
But, they are going to keep tabs on them. That's the wellness policy.
I think the mix of careers that are lengthened and talent that are let go because of their issues, I think they even out to where...
You think so?
I think you still have like Cena and people like that who get their opportunities when they did. I still think that stuff happens.
I think, if anything, if there isn't enough room in WWE, WWF, if there was more organizations like there are today, with like Lucha Underground and ROH and TNA and PWG and AAA in Mexico, and just name off a couple more for me, guys. CMLL, New Japan, CZW,
New Japan, All Japan, Big Japan, Zip Japan.
There you go. Yeah,
Zip Japan is a fake one. That was Big Japan and Fire Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
But anyways,
yeah, I figured you were talking about that. Yeah.
Kaiju Big Battle.
Yes.
Will we see Kaiju Big Battle step up?
John Cena in Kaiju Big Battle.
Do they do not have a wellness policy in Kaiju Big Battle?
Who would be
facing test them up?
Because they're all fucking aliens. So Kaiju Big Battle would be a haven for people.
I want to see John Cena versus a ladder for a championship belt.
We're gonna see fucking X-Pac in Kaiju Big Battle.
But yeah, I just think like
these
guys,
he's still the 1-2-3 kid then.
If these guys are taken care of and they're taking care of themselves,
Ramon. Or is he
was in WCW
before he was too gone?
He was in WCW at that point. Well, yeah, he was in WCW for anything that would be considered the Attitude Era. So.
If there is any semblance of a policy that actually permeated throughout the industry, these guys, there wouldn't be as much room in WWE unless they did expand and go like what they're doing now. If they had enough money to expand, okay, cool. Do the roster split, whatever. But if they don't, these guys can still go to other organizations, make big names for themselves because, they're in great shape, they're in good sound body and mind, and, they could make money for wherever they go.
Yeah.
Will they be as big as they were? Maybe not. But you know what? They will be a hell of a lot more competitive than they were than they would be in a TNA now against the WWE.
So I think the wellness policy does give us a surplus of guys, as opposed to an equilibrium, like you're suggesting.
Is that a bad thing?
No, it's not a bad thing, but I also think, I don't necessarily think anybody just gets flat held out, but I think maybe guys like John Cena, maybe guys like CM Punk, people like that, maybe it takes them another few years to break through. Because there's some people at the top who get Austin's career is probably a lot longer.
Well, are we in agreement that ECW lasts longer with
I don't
this,
know.
Because Punk being there was Paul Heyman's doing.
True.
So if Heyman isn't with WWE with the the redo of ECW, maybe he goes into the first ECW and works up through there, and it's a totally different career path. Everybody's career path is pretty heavily altered.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the the Cruiserweight division now. They have NXT, they've got the Cruiserweight Classic. They've got, they're going to implement the guys from the Cruiserweight Classic into Raw. I mean, Raw itself is getting pretty bloated at 3 hours. And they can make that a show all about wrestling. They don't need the promos for that. They've got SmackDown. They've expanded once. If this were the kind of situation that happened back in the day where people were healthier and healthier and they stayed around longer, there would be a surplus of talent, like he said, and they'd have to put them somewhere, especially if one of these companies survived the other two. Or if, they all were on a level playing field and kind of even each other out. There's going to be a lot more opportunity for a lot more talent, but there's going to be bloat at some point, but what's one company's loss can be another company's gain. Even
It's
a smaller
true.
company
There are going to be more bodies around just for everybody to use.
like I
which
said,
is
look
a
at
good thing.
look at ROH and look at PWG, and
So you think that maybe this could cause a rise
Kind
to
of-
prominence of a fourth company? Is what you're suggesting?
Well, I don't know, maybe a fourth company, but kind of look at it like it is today, where you look at all the talent that's out there, and there's so much talent that's ripe for the picking that they can make any company that they go to a bit more recognizable at the very least. There's so much out there now, basically probably because of this wellness policy now.
Yeah.
It's helping people out.
And the most interesting thing about this is that we've discussed all these possibilities, and this is everything we discussed is absolutely viable. But the wellness program itself is such a big thing that I still feel like this is like one of those alternate universe scenarios where we could completely end up with a world where WWE dies completely, WCW becomes reigning king, or ECW, or whoever. Like it could go so many different ways that it is really difficult to nail down exactly what happens, because the impact of that program has been so large, and back then it would have been even larger. Like it would have just been such a drastic change from the Wild West that we had back then that this it's almost impossible to accurately predict. Like normally in Time Warp we do this with one guy. I think we usually do a pretty good job of getting in the ballpark of what would happen with them. But something like this
This is broad.
It's huge, and I don't know if any of the scenarios we discussed would have actually happened, or if stuff would have gone out completely differently. But it was absolutely a really, really interesting topic to take a look at. Again, Danny Messi, thank you for sending that along to us. I think that's going to wrap it up for us for this episode of Time Warp. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. Please be sure to check out the website, www.changingtheqs.com. That's changingtheqs.com. If you want to get a hold of us on Twitter, you can do so at changingtheqs, again, at changingtheqs. Also be sure to check us out on Facebook. If you want to send us a good old-fashioned email, you can do so at changingthequestions@gmail.com. Also, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. That is going to wrap it up for this episode of Time Warp. Again, hopefully we are going to be getting a more regular schedule of content going back in now that my schedule's freed up a little bit more, so be sure to check out the website. We're going to be having more stuff going up every day. For Mr. Two Guns Peruzzi.
Today's day 147 of the Miz's never-ending Intercontinental Championship World Tour.
The honkometer? Where's the honkometer?
For my partner, Mike Miner, I'm Paul Laporte. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon. That was probably really loud into the microphone.